Welcome back to Long Delays Hobbies. Today we're going to be painting the old mighty int himself, Treebeard. This is a fairly substantial, hefty model, but being that it is a model based off of a tree, a lot of organic bits and bobs, it takes very well to dry brushing, which is what we're going to be spending most of our time doing. So it is not a model that takes a lot of time to paint in spite of its hefty size. So we are going to begin with a base coat of dryad bark over our standard primer coat of some Chaos Black. You could just use any old black primer here. So I did not start with a dry brush of the dryad bark just because I wanted to make sure I covered up all of that black. But I just grabbed one of the larger brushes in my collection and I covered all of the brown bits of the miniature. So almost all of the model is brown. This is not a particularly challenging bit. So the only bits of the model that are not brown are the rock he's holding in his left hand. There are some little bits of leaf in his beard and kind of throughout the model that we're going to point out later, as well as some pieces of moss and mushroom and so forth. But you know, other than that rock he's holding, like probably 95% of the model is going to be covered in dryad bark. And we're now going to wash everything that we have just painted with some Agrax or Shade. But I'm putting a lot of the shade wash on my brush here just to make sure I get into all those cracks and crevices, because whenever I go back over this with a dry brush, I do want to make sure that the bits underneath of the dry brush remain pretty dark. And you can see what he looks like now that he has been base coated and washed. And we're going to go over that with a dry brush of Gorthor Brown. And I use makeup brushes whenever I do dry brushing, so you can be pretty heavy-handed here with your dry brush because you want to get almost all of the surfaces that you have just washed. You do want to keep some of that darker washed undertone visible. And that's what he looks like after the first round of dry brushing. And we're going to now go over with a second layer of dry brushing. This is going to be a lighter dry brush with Bane Blade Brown. Now with this dry brush, I tried to be a little bit more careful about leaving the Gorthor Brown visible in parts of the miniature that I already went over. This is almost like a highlighting dry brush. But the good thing is, since this is a more organic piece, you can be a little bit more, liberal with your brush strokes. You don't have to be, extremely cautious. If you make a mistake here or there, of course, you can fix it. You can also just kind of say that, oh, well, he's a tree, and trees vary in tone from one part of the tree to another part of the tree. And so with our skin tone done, or bark tone, or however you want to call it, we're going to work on the rock. We're going to begin by base coating the rock with Mechanica Standard Gray Air. So just kind of carefully work around the little fingers to make sure we don't get any of the gray paint on the bits that have been previously dry brushed. But otherwise, just go over with a couple of layers of Mechanica Standard Gray to get a nice even base coat. And then once that's done, I went back over that with some Nuln Oil to darken it down a shade, because that Mechanica Standard Gray was looking a little bit lighter than I would have liked, and I did want to, there are some nice cracks in the sculpt for the rock, so I wanted to make sure that those were visible by using Nuln Oil. And after that, I used some Dawnstone Air to kind of carefully go back over some of the bits where I had washed with Nuln Oil and bring out a little bit of that brightness, but not all of it. I left the Nuln Oil in the cracks so that there would still be some contrast. And the final stage of the rock was to just carefully do a dry brush with some Administratum Gray to give it like a little bit more of an organic look, since it is kind of a stone that he picked up on the way to Isengard. Of course, you want to be very careful about not getting the gray onto the bits of bark that you painted previously, particularly when painting the part of the rock that's on the inside of his hand, that it's facing towards his body. That's the trickier part to paint. And so with the rock finished, we're gonna go through and paint the various leaves on Treebeard's body and beard and feet and arms and legs. So I used Caliban green for this. This was a bit of a scavenger hunt for me. I think I spent more time looking for leaves on Treebeard than and painting them than I did on any other individual part, just because they're so, like, this is a pretty large miniature and their leaves, like, every time I turned around I found another leaf. The first time I did a round of painting, I actually missed a couple, so I had to go back and clean those up. But of course, take some time looking at the miniature to see what you can find. It also helps to look on the Games Workshop 3D spit turnaround and see what they have painted green as well. I went through and washed all those leaves with some Biltan green. And then I went through and highlighted them with moot green to make the green really like stand out and pop. This was a pretty tedious process since there are a lot of leaves, but I did think it was worth it because the green, even though it is kind of an accent color in this miniature, it really does, the little bits of green really make the model stand out. So we're now going to paint the little bits of moss that are in a few parts of the model. He's got a couple clumps on his left foot, so we're going to base coat those with Lupercal green. He also has some just kind of hidden in his beard as well. Just kind of look around and try to guess what seems to look like moss, and just paint those with Lupercal green. I went and washed the Lupercal green over with Chalia Green Shade, which is a kind of a bluish green color, to make sure that they look distinct from the leaves, because I did not want the moss to look anything like the leaves in terms of color. And to make them look a little bit more like moss, I did some spotting on them with Sons of Horus green. Now he also has some mushrooms or fungus of some sort on his left eyebrow and one or two other places, so I base coated those with some Xandri Dust Air. And washed it with some Agrex Earthshade. Again, this is just almost an accent to like break up a lot of that dark brown. I then highlighted the mushrooms with a Talarn Sand. It's now time to paint his eyes, and so because he has some orange eyes in the film, I painted the eyes with a base coat of Jacaro Orange, which is a kind of a darker orange color. And I painted the slits of his eyes with Abaddon Black. And after applying some basic texture and leaves to his base, I think he is ready to go throw some stones at the Tower of Eisen. Burarum. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you have any other suggestions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below this video. Bye bye.